Friday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Cameron Wolfe on who he thinks the Browns' starting quarterback will be. This is from NFL Network's The Insiders.
From what I understand, I'd handicap Joe Flacco as the favorite going into training camp, but Kenny Pickett's going to have a chance to steal that job from him. I think it's more likely that it's Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco than Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel. And I spent draft week in Brea with the Browns, and I talked to Kevin Stfansky on draft day. I had a good idea they weren't taking a first-round quarterback. Said, are you comfortable with Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett as starting quarterback? Without hesitation, he said yes. And I'm like, why? He's like, Joe has an immense knowledge of my scheme. Remember 2023, came off the couch, 4-1, played really well. We know that we're going to have a very high floor with Joe. And he talked about Kenny Pickett and his talent and feeling like they can develop more out of him as well. We've seen in the past Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold sort of get career resurgence, and there's a belief they can do some of that with Kevin Stfansky. But the reality is this Browns team, not a high chance people think of making the playoffs. There's a good chance we probably see multiple quarterbacks start throughout the season. And even if it is one of the vets earlier, maybe we still see Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel later in the season as his team continues to build and develop. I know one thing is clear. There's 4 quarterbacks on the roster. There may be a question at the end of August. Is there one out? Is one getting traded? From what I understand, not planning to move on either rookie. So maybe whichever vet loses his job, maybe on the trading block.
And again, we'll see how that all plays out. Rookies report to camp in about 3 weeks, so not very long before they'll get things going. Nathan Zigura, Browns radio analyst, on which quarterback could bring the most in a trade?
Probably at this point, Kenny Pickett, just because he is a former first rounder and he is young and he started, he's 15-10 as a starter. So that would be one. It would be interesting if, for example, maybe down in New Orleans, where Kellen Moore was just with him in Philly, if he said, I'd like to, it's not working out with Tyler Shuck, maybe we need to bring him down here to be kind of the starter and see what he has. He would, but I also think you got to take a step back and think about this from the Browns standpoint is, number one, kind of obviously you're trying to win games this year. I think that goes without saying. Kenny Pickett has been a winning quarterback in this division and in the National Football League. A guy that, as Ken and I talked about a few weeks ago, not supposed to like because he was the Steelers guy. We pointed out all of his flaws, and certainly there's a reason that he's now on to his third team. But we've seen guys bounce around and have kind of a career resurgence.
And again, Kevin Stfansky kind of alluded to that. He thinks that that can be Kenny Pickett this year. All right, Mina Kimes from ESPN's NFL Live, talking about the importance of a strong defensive front.
Like the 2 best pass rushers in football last year, I believe, were Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett, both of whom led the NFL in pressures. But on their own teams, no defensive tackle ranked inside the top 20. And as a result, quarterbacks were able to escape them. Offenses were able to account for them. I think it's a big part of why the Browns took Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan, who they believe gives them pass rush upside and fits well with that in that 4-2 front that they usually play. I really believe from a roster construction, and you and I have talked about this a lot with the interior defensive linemen, you cannot just have a single stud edge rusher. In fact, you might be better off with multiple really good rushers than just one dude, as much as those guys are deservedly paid the salaries that they are.
Well, in addition to Mason Graham, there's Malik Collins that they signed as a free agent who gets after the quarterback, and Mike Hall Jr., who they took with the 2nd round. So they have beefed up that defensive tackle position. Plenty more Browns. G. Bush, Spencer German along a little bit later in the show. The Guardians will begin a 3-game series against the Cardinals tonight. Scoring runs continues to be a problem for the Guardians. Trade deadline, July 31st. History tells us the Guardians are going to trade someone. It's going to be for somebody that they control for multiple years relative to that contract. Play-by-play voice, Tom Hamilton, with his thoughts on either a trade asset that the Guardians could bring back into the fold or potentially bringing somebody up from AAA.
I think a guy you got to keep an eye on now is Juan Breurto. He's back healthy. He had a big night for Columbus. He's missed a lot of this year, had to have thumb surgery. But this guy was knocking on the door when we went to camp. He had a chance to make this team out of spring training. That being said, we're looking at all left-handed hitters except Breurto being a switch hitter. So it's great to want to see Chase DeLauder. One, you've got to make sure that when he does get here, he's a guy that you can play more than 3 times a week. You can't do that at this level trying to win. And he's also a guy that is a left-handed outfielder. So somebody is going to lose a job. So are there trades that could be made to open up spots for certain people? Possibly. So I think you're going to see them try to get better for this year, but also going forward. It's not a year where you go and trade the farm for Andrew Miller like they did in 2016.
It's Luis Ortiz on the mound tonight for the Guardians against Sonny Gray to get that 3-game series against the Cardinals going. Now remember, Jose Ramirez hit by a pitch, left the game yesterday afternoon against the Blue Jays. Stephen Vogt earlier today on the MLB Network radio talking about Ramirez and his availability for tonight.
He's probably not going to be able to play tonight. He's pretty sore. Thankfully, X-rays were negative. We're hoping it's not going to be too long. But yeah, I'm not sure if Jose won't start today. He might be available off the bench late game, but we got to be careful with this. Obviously, got him in the forearm. Like I said, thankfully no breaks, but probably going to need another day.
And again, he is not in the lineup, nor is Carlos Santana. So Guardians against Cardinals tonight. Cavs made 2 picks in the second round of the NBA draft last night. Tyrese Proctor, 6'6" guard from Duke, was their first second-round pick, and Celio Niang was their second of the second round. Niang, he's going to stay overseas. Proctor reportedly will be signed to a multi-year contract and on the Cavs roster. College basketball analyst for Fox Sports, John Fanton, what the Cavs are getting in Proctor.
For him, it's just a matter of, number one, he played 3 years in college, so that hurts your stock sometimes because there's not as much of an upside. Number two, I think he's trying to fully figure out what he's best at from a scoring perspective. But Riz, he's 6'6". He could shoot the lights out from 3. I've seen this kid go off in games where he's knocking down 5, 6, 7 threes. It is a very good value pick for the Cavaliers. I think it's a steal this deep in the draft because there is a world where he could have been, a top 35 pick in this draft. The Cavs got him at 49. I really like this selection.
Time for us to take a quick timeout. Browns are up first. It's G. Bush coming up on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. Former NFL safety Gerard Cherry on when he thinks the Browns need to decide on a starting quarterback for Week 1.
I wouldn't play the 4-quarterback game. My approach would be, you're my starter, you're my second-string guy, and you're my third-string guy. Now, if you guys are that close in proximity, then okay, I'll have a little battle here, but at some point I'm going to make this really clear, you're my guy, and we move from there. You don't even want to take him to the first preseason game, to be honest with you. Think about how lackluster our preseason preparations have been and how that's resulted in the start of the season, especially last year. Yeah. So I'm of the mindset of these dudes play in the preseason games. If Patrick Mahomes can play in the preseason game, why can't we?
I'm with you. Yeah, we both believe in that. And it sounds like Kevin Stfansky is going to change his tune a little bit. But look, the preseason is going to be must-watch football, which it hasn't been over the past couple years.
Let's welcome in G. Bush, Garrett Bush from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, as well as the Barbershop. And G. Bush, I have termed a new thing here. The Browns quarterback competition, it's not a marathon, it's not a sprint, it's a relay race. Somebody's going to get the baton first game, and they're going to be giving it off to somebody else. But there's a certain amount of truth to what Gerard Cherry is talking about, because the cadence is different. How guys get in and out of the huddle is different. They got to do something to figure that out for week one if they're serious about winning games. And I believe they are serious about winning games this year.
Well, this is why we've talked about this a little bit before. When you start to talk about, what the rep situation is looking like and what's going on with the reps, whether Shedeur is getting them, he's not getting them. This is why people in the camp of give everybody the reps is because you have mini camps, you have rookie mini camps, you got training camp coming up. What is the purpose of not giving somebody reps in a drill in which you aren't going to get hit? You're not going to have anything bad happen. They can't hit the quarterbacks, and you guys are all calling the same plays. So the thought process that, hey, you go over there with the 3s and 4s, and this is a quarterback competition, or what is supposedly a quarterback competition, it's just, it don't really make sense. I think about this with the Cleveland Browns. They seem like a team that doesn't understand concisely what they want to do. In the third round, they took Dylan Gabriel, right? And that signaled that, hey, you like him a whole lot to take him in the third. But then you took Shedeur Sanders, which muddied the waters a little bit. You went out and you got Kenny Pickett. You traded DTR in the 5th round pick to go get him. But then you just went and got Joe Flacco, who's a guy who people have seen lead the team to the playoffs, has a Super Bowl ring, and is not the type of guy that's going to just sit around and twiddle his thumbs. He's going to come in and work. That's the type of guy Joe Flacco is. He's going to come in and do his thing. So when you have a mix of those contradictions that are in your playbook, that are in your stable, you're going to have people confused and asking questions. Gerard is like, look, in one hand, he is correct. You can't get 4 guys ready to take snaps. But on the other hand, you did say it was a competition. Mm-hmm. And the only way you got competition is you got to give everybody reps to see. And the elephant in the room is this. They ain't seen it, and I think they've seen it. They'll see it when it comes up. Emmett Golden is correct. The preseason will be must-watch football. And I'm going to tell you right now, if those rookies come out there and look like they're anything or it's close, you're going to have the entire Northeast Ohio clamoring to see either Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. Because the reality of the situation is this. The Cleveland Browns are not in win-now situations. The Cleveland Browns mandate is, hey, we all know that you got 2 first-round picks next year. You might want to figure out what's going on with these quarterbacks, especially the young ones, to see if you got something. Because my thing is, I don't want to seem like we wasted draft picks on the 3rd and 5th round. If you were going to play a quarterback or go into the draft next year and draft a quarterback, why'd you even draft any of them? You could have just played Pickett and Joe Flacco and did what you did this year and kept those 3rd-round picks and got a receiver, kept that 5th-round pick, got a lineman, and everybody in their mind would have known that you was going to come back next year and take the best available quarterback at 1. You didn't say that. You said, I'm going to take Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. So now people going to want to see him play.
Yeah, the other thing is you can't – when a quarterback is not playing well this year, if you have 3, if you have 4, you can't give me the stuff you were giving me last year with Deshaun Watson, playing him and telling me it gives you the best chance to win. If somebody's not playing well, yeah, we got other guys that we're going to give a shot to here.
And and by the way, this you brought a great point. This is a relay game. Do you really want to be the first guy out the box?
Yeah.
Do you want to be the leader? It's like running a 400-meter race. Yeah, you was winning the first leg of the race, but what happened on that backstretch? Can you imagine Kenny Pickett going out there and he wins the job? You got 2 rookies behind you and a dude in Joe Flacco that has all kind of cachet. The first pick he throws, people is ready to go.
Yep.
They're like, no, we've seen this. Come on.
Yep. I'm with you. Albert Breer, this is from the Rich Eisen show, talking about can the Browns keep all 4 of those quarterbacks?
The interesting nuance to that is, so generally 3rd-round picks make the team. Shedeur is in a spot where he's vulnerable a little bit, as a 5th-round pick, because 5th-round picks don't always make the team out of camp.
Mm-hmm.
But 3rd-round picks like almost always make the team. It's very rare that you cut a 3rd-round pick. It's big news when you cut a 3rd-round pick. So I think the question becomes, is one of those two guys good enough to be the backup, right? And I know, like, everybody wants to talk about, are they going to start one of them? Are they going to start one of them? Are they going to start one of them? I think the more important question, as far as Kevin Stfansky goes from a roster building standpoint, is can one of them get to the point in the offense where he's good enough to be the backup, where we can trust him and put him in a pinch if Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett go down? Because if one of them is, well, then that gives them the flexibility to move one of the veterans off the roster. So I think that'll be a really important piece. But I think there's a likelihood both of them are, and that, you know, either Flacco or Pickett wind up gone in week 1. It sounds a little crazy, but I think that's a possibility. And I mean, if both Shedeur and Dillon look good, maybe you keep 4. It's sort of like, you know, like I kind of feel like you contradict yourself when you're saying that. If they look good, then they're good enough to be the backup. Then you only keep 3, cut one of the vets.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of complicated because of the numbers, of course.
The other thing is, G. Bush, the rookies have to go out and play well. If they go out and play well, the veterans are going to see it. The veterans see it. The coaches will eventually be dragged along one way or another. But in order for those guys to earn what they need to earn, being Gabriel and Sanders, everybody's got to know it on the field first.
Yeah, listen, I think the people misconstrue a lot what people are saying. We're not saying by no reason stretch of imagination that Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders should be given anything. We're not saying that, because you got guys on the team that's not what they're trying to do. Joe Bitonio came back. He didn't come back to have people given the opportunity. Myles Garrett was talking about, hey, listen, I want to win football games. You think he came back to look around? I know he got his money, but, like, listen, that's not what it's about. You need guys to get behind you. And the cool thing about this is the great thing about the sport of football is you're going to get that opportunity. And in the preseason, I think that you give those opportunities to the people and then let them earn it. To earn it, you got to give an opportunity. To earn it, you got to give them the shots. You got to give them these preseason games count. These practices are going to count. These inter-squad scrimmages or scrimmages with the Panthers and the Eagles, they're going to count. Give them the opportunity, and let's see if they can sink or swim. If they earn those opportunities and they play well against other teams, then give them more opportunities. But the thing is, nobody's saying that, look, we're not gonna give you anything, right? I want all 4 guys to come out here and compete and be ready to go. But the thing is, trust me, I think the Cleveland Browns, they have a mandate, and the mandate is this. Yeah, at the same time, I want you to be competitive. I want you to go out here and win football games. But they're going to have to figure out what's going on with this quarterback room, because this is the elephant in the room for me. If you can't figure out, they didn't figure the Baker thing out. They didn't figure the Deshaun Watson thing out. You got a referendum on figuring out what's going on with Dylan Gabriel as well as Shedeur Sanders, right? We figured that out. You got to go you got Flacco. People wanted Flacco back. How many shows did we do last year? Yep. Why did you bring Flacco back? Why did you you got Kenny Pickett. He's a former first-round pick. We think everything that comes from Pittsburgh is great. You find me something in this scrap heap right here, because I know the Big Bays do. I know the Shanahan's fine, guys. Let me see if we can find something here. But for me, I want to see them play, and I want them to put them in a position that we can identify if we got something here with these dudes.
All right, let's turn our attention to the defensive line. So a little bit of a surprising move yesterday when they released Obo Okoro. Nathan Zigura, analyst, Browns radio network, talking about why he thinks they let Okoro go.
I think it's a combination of Tryon Shoyinka came in. He looked good. They're waiting to get after June 1st for Obo. This gives them an opportunity to sign with another team as well. And, you can always go back to what do a lot of times these things are, is that it feels like the Browns think that in the guys they signed and the rookies that they have they like that defensive end room. I can tell you that very much. And Obo was a great dude when he was here. I really enjoyed interviewing him whenever we got the opportunity to do that. And I thought that he played well, especially his first year here. He had 12 tackles for loss, which was a career high. But you look at the salary ramifications when he signed that 3-year, $19 million deal, their Browns are going to save because of when they did this over the next 2 seasons. And the way that they kind of have done their contracts is they throw on these void years that allows kind of the salaries to be spaced out. But because they're doing that, and because they did do that with him, it's going to save them over the next couple of years about $8 million. So I think that's why the move was made, more so than necessarily his performance, and that they felt like they had guys coming in that would be able to replace that performance.
Bush, $8 million. He didn't do enough to justify keeping him. What do you think of the defensive line room? I'm intrigued by it. They're young. If you don't pay attention and didn't watch some really bad football from the Browns last year, you might not know Isaiah McGuire. You might not know Alex Wright before he got hurt. How good can this defensive line be, do you think?
I think it's all going to – their defensive line is going to come down to 2 people, Mason Graham and Mike Hall Jr. And I've been saying it. Listen, I know they got some free agents that they brought in, Lee Collins they brought in, and they got some guys in there still that they think that they like a little bit. I think Briggs is still here. But look, those 2 guys are your first two draft choices in last year's draft, and Mike Hall Jr., who was a 2nd-round pick. Some felt that he could have been a first-round type talent if he came back another year. Quick, twitchy guy, shows some flashes, gets off the ball quick from Ohio State. And then Mason Graham, you traded the pick, you traded and you moved and you moved on, and you didn't take Travis Hunter, 2-way player. We talked about this a lot, but Mason Graham, if you're going to be the 5th pick, you got to be dominant. Day one, rep 1, those 2 guys should be starting. And this is, for me, the movement that I'm looking forward to is the youth movement. I need to figure out what's going on. If the Cleveland Browns are going to take those guys highly, I need them to be starting day one. I like JTS over at the other end. He's a guy that was a first-round pick out of Washington. I think they played him out of position a little bit too much in Tampa Bay. Todd Bowles runs like this weird 3-4 type thing. They had him dropping in the coverage. That's not his game. I want to see him get his hand in the dirt and excelling, just moving forward and causing pressure. Isaiah McGuire, PFF loves him. They love him, how he can stop the run. I think he was rated the 3rd-rated defensive end or defensive lineman, defensive end in terms of stopping a run. And then Alex Wright was trending in the right direction. Unfortunately, he got injured the first couple games of the season last year. So he has a lot of upside. I think they got some rotation guys, and obviously you got Myles Garrett. So look, I would have moved on from Obo. I think he showed some things that first year, but then again, the defense was overall dominant that first year. You had JOK, you had Myles Garrett. It was a special type defense that year. Last year, you see the injuries, you see the production tail off a little bit. PFF has them ranked, I believe, the 7th best defensive line. I was like, I don't know if I would put them at 7. I think they're at 7 strictly because of Myles Garrett. But I do think they have a lot of upside, and it could be an exciting part of the team where it could be a potential strength by far because they've invested a lot of resources in that. Myles Garrett costs a lot of money. You've spent a lot of draft picks there, and you've been using a lot of money in free agency to try to shore up the defensive line. So it's an area that I think could be a bright spot for the Browns this year, though.
Bush and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll continue to talk about the additions to the Browns roster this offseason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
We continue talking Browns with G. Bush from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show and the Barbershop. Sam Monson from Check the Mic podcast, he and Steve Palazzolo, talking about why they think the Browns' off-season additions are underrated.
I think this is a crazy grading. I think this is utterly ridiculous, in fact. Again, starting point, Myles Garrett demanded a trade. instead of trading one of the best players in the NFL, they've extended him and got him locked into a new contract, albeit, one of the most expensive contracts in the NFL. But they've gone from their best player wanted at the door to he's happy again. That's good, right? The only criticism you could give them is, I thought drafting where they were, number 2 overall, is a potential gift and a way out of their quarterback hell that, as you so rightly say, they put themselves in with the worst move in NFL history in Deshaun Watson. You can debate how they got there, but they ended up with the quarterback I would have taken at number 2. Like, I would have taken Shedeur Sanders just because I think they need a way out of that. They got him in the 5th round. So they got the same guy, and they're paying him like a fraction of the money they would be paying him if they got him at number 2. And they got an extra roll of the dice, like a bonus lottery ticket with Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round as well. So, and you can argue that if they didn't think that those 2 guys really had a chance of being that answer, that their process is way better than mine, right? Why? We don't think he's worth this spot, so we're going to trust that that the draft is correct, and we'll let him slide till day 3, and then we'll make a couple of moves and trade down and pick up the extra 1st round pick next year.
So, G. Bush, again, it's interesting. Here's the additions when you look at them. It's Graham, Schlesinger, Judkins, Sampson, Fanton, the quarterbacks. Let's take the quarterbacks out of that equation. We'll talk about them in a minute. How many of those guys, the 2 running backs, Graham, Schlesinger, Fanton, do you need to see as impact players to think that the draft has been a success?
Well, listen, I would need to. First of all, I'll start with I think they're going to get out of that. Schlesinger is a starter. Judkins is a starter. We talked about Mason Graham last segment. He's a starter. That's 3 right there. I think Harold Fanton Jr. can potentially, with the way that the sets they're going to look, if you look at the snaps and the reps at the end of the year, I think he'll have starter-type snaps at tight end. I also think they'll move him around, play some little H-back, little fullback. He'll be on the field a lot. Dylan Sampson is a guy who I think is going to be battling with Jerome Ford for third down carries, but I love Dylan Sampson. I give him a lot of touches, and I'd have him playing early and often. When you look at him, I think they still like Jerome Ford, but he's going to be a person that you will see get carries. So if you look at it from that standpoint, we just named off the first 3 or 4 guys that are going to be starters, and that's what you need in terms of having a season when you say, okay, how are we going to judge this from a draft standpoint? How many starters did you get? And I think they're sitting at 3 and a possible. Fanton will play a lot because they love tight end sets, if that's what they're going to go back to. And you got Dylan Sampson, who I think is going to get touches and carries in this offense because they're going to want to run the ball and do some other things as well. I think that's one of the reasons why they haven't done anything at wide receiver, because they feel, all right, we have Dylan Sampson, we have Harold Fanton Jr. Those guys are going to be guys that are going to be a part of our passing game in some aspect, maybe not down the field pass catchers. But I think that's one of the things that we look at in terms of this draft class. And I think you wouldn't be hard pressed to say that you get 4 starters out of the guys that we watched. And you should say that because of what they did in college and where they transitioned and the empty glaring holes that you got, especially with Schlesinger and JOK.
So now we'll get to the quarterbacks. Tell me what you think about this. And I've thrown this out a little bit. I don't think they're going to operate this year trying to find out what they have in the quarterback position. I think they're going into the draft next year assuming they're taking a quarterback with the highest of those first-round picks. And here's where I arrive at that. If you remember, Baker Mayfield, when he was playing in that 18 to 20 to 15 range, wasn't good enough. They went out and got Deshaun Watson because they thought they needed better. So I think they're looking at if one of those picks is in the top 5, they're taking a quarterback. They're taking fill-in-the-blank quarterback who has shot up the draft board, unless one of these rookies plays so well that they're like, well, that's our guy. In order for them not to take a quarterback, one of these guys has to be darn near this year's Jaden Daniels.
Listen, that's the frustrating part about the Browns, right? So here's the thing. If you have that philosophy, right? If you have that philosophy and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, I'm going into next year and I'm going to find me a quarterback next year. Well, listen, where's your game plan at? If you're going to do that, I'm not taking Dylan Gabriel. I'm not even taking Shedeur in the fifth. If that's what you wanted to do, you could have. It's a 1-year deal you got for Kenny Pickett. You got a 1-year deal for Flacco. You know what that would have signified to everybody? Flacco is 40. Pickett is looks like a rental 1-year rental guy, and we're not going to sign after this year. Guess what? The position's wide open. And what you could have did is say, hey, Dylan Gabriel, I could turn that into a receiver, which we lack mightily. Well, I could turn that into somebody I could be developing right now. And then when you get your quarterback, you have an already set up thing like, hey, I know we needed some more depth on the offensive line. We took our 5th and 6th round picks and we bolstered the defensive line. We went and got a safety that we thought could play a little bit. We went and got another receiver. So we're setting this thing up to say, okay, good. That's what you want to move? Fine. But when you take Dylan Gabriel in your 3rd, that means you, and Albert Breer said it. I didn't say he said it. You rarely cut a 3rd round pick. I mean, and a lot of people believe that was high for Dylan Gabriel to begin with. You remember all of the names that were on the board at receiver at that point in time. Then you take Shedeur Sanders. And my thing is, you got to have the conversation, because if you plan on having Shedeur Sanders on your roster, it's easy to say he ain't going to play today. It's even easy to say he ain't going to play in training camp. But there's a small thing that tends to happen. The fan base gets a little rabid. People get a little up in arms. And if you start losing games and you lose games and you look at the first part of the Browns schedule, they're losing something.
They're losing some games.
They're going to lose some games. So then you almost have to play the gladiatorial game. Give the people what they want.
Here's another one for you. If you're approaching it like this year's kind of, you got to figure things out, why'd you sign Myles Garrett to a 4-year and give him $160 million?
I'm trying to figure that out, like in real time. Because if this was a punt and this was all about the stadium in a couple of years, right? You got your picks, right? I mean, today, if you have Myles Garrett signed to a contract, well, I guess it don't really make no sense now, because obviously if you trade him, the cap penalties, whatever the ramifications. But here's the situation. Why would you do that? You should have took what you could have got. And maybe it was the punitive nature of Myles Garrett and how much money it would have cost you to move him in terms of the dead cap money with Deshaun Watson. My thing is this too. You got to think about the savings. If you find a franchise quarterback between Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, nobody will ever talk to you about Deshaun Watson.
Nope.
Because guess what? You got these guys playing for pennies on the dollar. Now you could keep Deshaun Watson perpetually at the back of your roster and pay him to go rehab, and nobody will talk about it because you got a quarterback in the 3rd or the 5th round.
Yeah. The whole thing, though, is the Myles Garrett thing makes me believe they think they're going to win some this year with either Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett.
You know what I will say? I'll say this. I was convinced. I was one of the convinced people that Myles Garrett wasn't going to come back. He came back. I was convinced they were going to take Travis Hunter. They took a defensive tackle and traded down. I don't know what the heck they're going to do. If you told me this season breaks 100 different ways, I don't know what's going to happen between Joe Flacco being older. He might be playing Kenny Pickett, whether or not he has something left in the tank, or which one of these quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders, can light it up. I like Shedeur. I think he has the ability to throw the football. We'll see if he gets enough throws or opportunities to make himself do that, because I will tell you this, though. They seem to be a team that doesn't really know. I think maybe Barry may want to go away. Stfansky got an optimum way he think it might go, but then it's always the big bad wolf in the room. And Jimmy Haslam, he's the wild card.
Yeah, you know what? Again, we'll see how that plays out. One thing is, it's never dull. Never dull with Browns coverage. G. Bush, as always, man, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
All right.
Make sure you check him out. Garrett Bush, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. Also, weekends, the Barber Shop. Always really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Spencer German, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Former NFL wide receivers TJ Houshmandzadeh and James Jones on who they think the Browns starting quarterback should be. This from FS1's The Facility.
I'm starting Shedeur. You started 4 years of college. You starting for me? Absolutely you starting. I've seen what Kenny Pickett can do. Is he going to be like a Sam Darnold? You go to Philly, you learn, and now you're a better quarterback? I'm going with Shedeur. He's accurate. He can throw with anticipation. Is he's the strongest arm, the most athletic? No. Shedeur Sanders starting for me.
If it's not Kenny Pickett, the only other option is Shedeur, because I believe he's the best talented quarterback on that roster. I know you drafted Gabriel in the third, but I don't think he's as good as Shedeur. So let's see what Shedeur has and put him out there in that game. But I do not mind Kenny Pickett going out there first with him being young and giving him the key.
Well, first of all, James Jones, doesn't matter if you think that Shedeur Sanders is better than Dylan Gabriel because you didn't draft for the Browns. Kevin Stfansky and Andrew Berry did, and they took Dylan Gabriel 2 rounds ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, as well as the Locked On Browns podcast. Spencer, I kind of laugh at some of these former players nationally. It doesn't matter who you think is better. It doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I actually agree with James Jones that Shedeur, in my opinion, is the most talented quarterback on this roster. But it's again, my opinion isn't going to influence the team and what decision they make at the quarterback position. And I also think too, like if they sort of signal to you who they think the better of the two quarterbacks is by the order that they took these guys. If they thought Shedeur was better, they would have taken him earlier. They took Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. By all indications, Kevin Stfansky, he was kind of glowing with excitement about talking about Dylan Gabriel and what they saw in him and how excited they are to have him when they drafted him that weekend. And so, like, as much as I would love to see Shedeur start week 1, hit the ground running, just kind of be given this long leash to sort this to see what he can bring to the table, and if he does have that franchise quarterback quality in his game, it's just not something that I think the Browns are sort of setting up to do. They have essentially indicated at this point that it's Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco at the top of this depth chart, and that the other two are sort of fighting for that primary backup spot, and they're sort of slow playing it with these rookies. So I tend to agree. As much as I'd love to see Shedeur week 1, they are setting the stage for a veteran to start, and then I think we'll see both these rookies at some point next year. It's just a matter of when. I will say though, Dave, there is something that entices me about the idea of starting one of the rookies early in the season and then transitioning to the other rookie like halfway through the season if it's not going well, just to extend the runway of like what you see from these guys as you're trying to find out if you have a franchise quarterback. But again, that's where my head kind of goes. Their head is in a completely different place, and all indications are it's going to be one of those veterans starting week 1.
You know what? They're going to know. They're going to see him day in and day out. They're going to see how they handle everything. So it's not going to be just what you see on the field. I mean, that's important. Don't get me wrong. That's the most important thing. But they'll get an idea if one of these guys can be a franchise quarterback. Browns radio analyst Nathan Zigura talking about the challenges of keeping 4 quarterbacks on the roster. We've heard plenty about this.
It's just a lot of people to carry at that position. Not to say that it isn't the most important position in the NFL. It most certainly is. But I just think that is with what you need on game day. Now, the fact that you can elevate a couple people throughout the week gives you a little bit more flexibility if you didn't think that, for example, your third tight end would be somebody who would be poached off your practice squad. If you didn't think maybe your sixth wide receiver was somebody who wouldn't be poached off your practice squad. If you thought maybe your ninth offensive lineman was somebody you could get away with being there, you have the ability to elevate those people a few times a year. So that is a way that they could go about doing it and still getting what they want out of their, the game day active roster. But it would put a lot of stress on it, because I think when you look at this team and you look at it historically speaking, you're going to have 23 or 24 on offense. It is not going to be 25-25 split. There you're going to skew towards the defensive side. And I think at Browns, let's say it's 24 and 26.
Yeah, I get that. What are your thoughts just about how that whole quarterback landscape lays out as we head into training camp? I know you wrote an article about that. So take us through that. And the 4 quarterbacks is definitely a big question.
Yeah, I think it's easy to sit on, for us today, June 27th or the end of June, and say, well, hey, they could keep 4. I think it's a different story when you get to training camp, when you see what these guys bring to the table. Let's face it, almost at least once a year, there's an injury to another team's quarterback or a backup quarterback, and then some team is kind of left scrambling, looking for a backup quarterback, and that's what necessitates things like, Andrew Berry trading Josh Dobbs for a 5th-round pick a couple years ago. So, it's one thing to say that on June 27th that's a possibility. I think it's another thing to actually see it in action. You're doing the math on your roster, and you keep an extra quarterback. That's one less maybe offensive lineman you get to keep, or that's one less defensive a lineman you get to keep. And some of those are 2 positions that this team clearly values, especially with the Jim Schwartz system and how many injuries they've had up front of the offensive line over the years. So it's like those things all kind of add up. I also just think, like, if you keep 4, it kind of is a disservice to all the other quarterbacks, because on some level, you're going to start one of them, yes, but then it's like, how many of these guys are you going to try to go through in a single season? And I get, like, you could argue from an injury standpoint, with how things have gone the last couple of years for this team, maybe they need 4 quarterbacks. But I just think, like, you need to. It almost feels like if you keep all 4, that you haven't really made up your mind. Like, you're like, well, Joe Flacco might have looked the best, so we're going to start him. But we still really like Kenny Pickett, where we kind of want to go to him. But we also have these 2 rookies that we really. It's like, I think you got to make a decision on something there. And like I said, I feel like there will be a situation where some team needs a backup and you try to trade them. Maybe that doesn't come to fruition. I think you can maybe keep 4 for a short period of time. I don't know if you can, and even maybe beyond the first cut down, going into that weekend, they keep 4. But I don't know if it's something that you get to week 1 and they actually have 4 quarterbacks on this roster when it's all said and done.
So this was a topic from one of your Locked On Browns podcasts. Can Kevin Stfansky be trusted to develop the Browns quarterback?
I think this is the biggest test for Kevin Stfansky to still have to pass at this point in his tenure. And I know there's a lot of questions from some people about his ability as a head coach, questioning certain decisions, questioning play calling at times. I still think he's one of the better, more savvy offensive minds in this game, and I trust him in that regard. I don't know that Kevin Stefanski's ever been called a quarterback guru per se. Like, certain coaches get that label. I don't know that he's ever been called that, but that is part of the job. That's part of the gig. And this is the one thing he hasn't really had to do yet, right? When he got here, he had Baker Mayfield. And I just think it's interesting to, like, look back at his time, his resume with the quarterbacks he's worked with to this point. Year 1 with Baker Mayfield was the best season of Baker Mayfield's career up until that point. And so I think people were optimistic, like, yeah, Kevin's the right guy for this quarterback, but also to develop quarterbacks. And then he takes the massive step back in year 2. We know there were some injuries that were part of that equation. Year 3 is the Deshaun, Jacoby Brissett year. And Jacoby Brissett had one of the better years of his career with Kevin Stefanski. So it's like, okay, there's something there. And then Deshaun had some moments, but it was obviously very fleeting. And then last year was a complete disaster. And really the last 2 years, like, Flacco is the one guy who's had the most success in Stefanski's offense. And that's not a guy that you're really developing, because he's a 17-year veteran. Like, he knows what he's doing. He's well experienced and versed in what you were trying to accomplish in that offensive scheme, and it was the right fit for him. But, like, we have not seen to this point, and I'm not I'm not going to put a lot of stock in like DTR and how that whole thing went. I think they drafted DTR with this understanding of maybe he makes it as a backup. There was no attempt at really making him your franchise quarterback. It was like let's take a chance and see what happens. This is the first time Kevin Stefanski's getting a chance to, get his hands on 2 young quarterbacks and see what he can turn them into. And he might get a chance a second year in a row if he's still here next year to do the same thing if they draft a rookie in the first round, for example. So I'm fascinated to see what he does with this, because to this point, the only evidence we have of him being good with quarterbacks is that 1 year with Baker Mayfield where he made him look better, and it was the best year of his career up until a point, but now Baker's looked even better elsewhere. And then some other veteran quarterbacks who were already pretty established, and he just made them look better for where they were in their careers. So it's still a big question mark. It's probably the biggest thing that Kevin Stefanski has to answer for this season and beyond. And Andrew Berry will be judged too, based off of, the quarterback that they identify and bring to this roster and try to turn into the franchise guy as well. So certainly something to keep an eye on throughout this season, because this is the first attempt Kevin Stefanski's getting at trying to mold 2 young quarterbacks.
Yeah, and again, a lot of fans point to Baker Mayfield in particular. Remember, he went to Carolina, it didn't work out. He went to the Rams, and Sean McVay got him playing okay, but he's playing better in Tampa Bay. Some of that is part of a quarterback kind of figuring out what it takes to be an NFL quarterback. And, oh, by the way, he had Mike Evans as his wide receiver, who made Johnny Manziel a Heisman Trophy winner. Just remember that relative to Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. I mean, Mike Evans is a Hall of Fame wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point too. Like, different situations entirely. And I think certainly like some of that too relates to Baker's maturity, right? Like
absolutely.
He's talked a lot about his journey from some of the problems he had from a personality standpoint in Cleveland to, and I think in a lot of ways, like the trade from Cleveland humbled him in some regard, and he's kind of evolved and turned into this new quarterback on the other side of it all. So that's a factor here too. But, I just don't know that we've seen yet Kevin Stefanski like really turn a young quarterback into something. And so that's the big thing that, like I said, him and Andrew Berry still have to kind of answer for.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. You also came up with this topic. I'm curious. Browns' offensive strategy this season, the role of 12 personnel, so a running back, 2 tight ends. And can that help the passing game that's a little light on wide receivers?
Yeah, I think this is one of the more interesting discussions from from an X's and O standpoint, but just like about the philosophy of this team going into 2025 for this upcoming season, because they don't have we know the state of that wide receiver room. It's Jerry Jeudy, it's Deontay Johnson if he can stick and not get in his own way. It's Cedric Tillman, who they're really high on, but we still have to see it consistently from him, and he had the concussion last year, and that's about it. And it's a lot of unproven guys. They don't really have a guy yet identified to be like their starting slot receiver, and so that's where the 12 personnel stuff comes into play, because I think you're going to see a lot of – we know Kevin Stefanski likes 12 personnel anyway, but I think you're going to see a lot more of it just on the fact that because they don't necessarily have like a proven slot wide receiver at this juncture – they're going to use Harold Fanton in that role a ton. I think it's going to be him sort of outrunning routes, catching passes, David Njoku and his more like in line, off the line of or like right off the tackle spot where he can block because he's a better blocker at this point in his career and still going out and catching passes. And so sort of by default, like that Harold Fanton trade or that Harold Fanton draft pick feels like it's going to have a major impact on the flow of this offense, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, all those things. So I'm fascinated to see. We know Kevin Stefanski is going to use a lot of 12 personnel, like I said, but I'm fascinated to see like if it's higher than even before, if like how much of a role that plays in the offensive scheme, just because we know it's a very inexperienced wide receiver group, and we know they like Harold Fanton, having taken him in the 3rd round.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Locked On Browns podcast. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We'll talk a little bit more about this Browns roster and Andrew Berry's draft class. Sports4CLE, I'll be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Locked On Browns podcast, and the Cleveland Browns on SI. Marcus Spears, former defensive lineman in the NFL, on the Browns' rookie quarterbacks.
Here's the thing, man. I look at these two young quarterbacks they took in Dylan Gabriel and obviously Shador. You think about Flacco with his probably mastery of what they want to do offensively by being there the longest. Kenny Pickett obviously is one of those quarterbacks drafted first round. They want to see what he is. But to your point, Graz, a four-way competition is the best thing that it needs to be going into training camp. Because what you want to see from rookies is a mastery of the playbook. Can they play with confidence? Can they play with rhythm and timing? The Cleveland Browns still want to run the football. That is something that they want to do, which helps young rookies play early when they get drafted in the franchises. The only thing that gives me pause is the fact that Joe Flacco is going to give them a sense of calm with his presence, his obviously veteran, and he's played there before in playoff games, which is going to make it, to me, very hard for them to make a decision on one of those other three guys if Joe just shows them any semblance of being able to command this offense and put the ball where it needs to be.
And Spencer, here's the thing. The reason I bring that up, not to necessarily talk about the rookie quarterbacks. I'm curious as your thought on this. They convince Myles Garrett to come back with $160 million over 4 years. You get Joel Bitonio to come back. Initially, they're going to put the guy out there that gives you the best chance to win football games until it becomes apparent that this year is kind of going sideways and they can't compete for a playoff spot. Otherwise, I don't see how you do that based on what you've done in the offseason.
There's a lot of guys on this team, and I've talked about this a ton. Like, this roster isn't as bad, I think, as some are making it out to be because of a lot of the veteran presence on it. Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Joe Bitonio coming back. And, not that I ever think the organization would flat out say, like, we're tanking, right? Like, that's just not a word that teams use. They can do things that maybe feel like tanking, but nothing that Andrew Berry has done this offseason to tweak this roster has felt like it's them outwardly just like tanking. Now you can make the case like they might try to mitigate winning if they start a certain quarterback that maybe if they pick a guy that maybe doesn't look good during the preseason or something like that. Like there's arguments to be made there, sure. But I still think to your point, like you're talking about veterans putting their bodies on the line week in, week out. And I also think too, like you can't fool those guys. Last year, what we saw from the offense shouldn't have really been that surprising to anybody because that was what the offense was doing during training camp. It was false starts, pre-snap penalties, couldn't get the ball off, bad passes, it was all ugly. And I think they thought it would just kind of work itself out, and then it never did. And the next thing you know, you're 1-6 to start the season. Like it was bad. So like they can't fool those veterans. Those veterans are going to see who the best quarterback is, and they're going to have to pick that guy because you're trying to sell that locker room on, hey, we're trying to at least win early on in the year. We'll see what happens. And so, yeah, like if they switch this goes back to what we sort of talked about in the first segment. Like, as much as it'd be fun to get a rookie starting week 1 and know you get to evaluate one of these guys right off the rip, it's just not going to happen that way because this team is essentially trying to thread the needle between being competitive and trying to win now while also looking ahead to the future. And I think to do that, you start a veteran and then transition to the rookies later.
So you also wrote an article that Andrew Berry has a chance for redemption. The other thing that it pops into my head is, that because of the Deshaun Watson trade, there were a lot of third-round picks. And when you hit on guys that are not skill position players, running backs, even linebackers, it's not as obvious. There are some guys in this draft that it's going to be obvious if you hit on early.
For sure. And that's the biggest reason like that sort of inspired that article for me was just the idea that, we know Andrew Berry's draft history. The one resounding hit he's had is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and now we don't know if he's ever going to play football again, which is very unfortunate. You could argue like Grant Delpit, who got a second contract. You could say that Greg Newsome was, he's a fine pick. He's probably not getting a second contract, and that's ultimately what these guys are sort of graded on. But yeah, if I don't know that he was a first rounder, but he's fine. He's turned into a good player. I don't know if he's turned into a great player. And so when you have only one guy that really stands out, though, it is obvious, right? It is obvious what Andrew Berry's one hit is. And so that sort of then highlights the rest of the guys he's taken as not being very good. And so that's why it's been such a criticism of his over the years. And I understand, you didn't have first rounders because of the Deshaun trade. But at the same time, when you make a trade like that, you are banking on, you're banking on two things. You're banking on Deshaun being worth it, of course, which didn't happen. But you're also banking on you and your staff's ability to still fill out the roster by finding and hitting on talent in those later rounds. And that just hasn't happened either. So he's put himself behind the 8 ball here. But there is a world that exists where, if there's 3 guys that hit on this class or hit in this class, he sort of redeems himself in a way, or at least starts to change the narratives about his ability to draft and evaluate and draft players. And it sets the stage for him to ultimately get a second stab probably next offseason, if it plays out that way, to find the thing that he's really going to be judged on, which is, will he find the franchise quarterback for this team in the NFL draft? So the onus is on him. He's put a lot of pressure on himself, and it's up to him to sort of, make sure to have these picks pan out, and then he starts to change those conversations about him. And I also think what's interesting too is you could reach a situation where if the team is bad again, if they really only do win 3 games, which I don't think is going to happen. I think they're going to win more than that. But Andrew Berry's draft class looks really good. He has 4 guys that look like, they're going to be Pro Bowlers for years to come and maybe all pros. Then maybe there starts a conversation where it's well, does Kevin Stfansky still have a job at the end of the year? And it feels like Andrew Berry probably does have a job at the end of the year. Now, I think they're tied to each other, so ultimately probably wouldn't happen that way. I think Jimmy Haslam's going to let them both see this thing through at least till 2026, unless things go really, really awry. But I think that is an interesting conversation where it's last year we would have said Andrew Berry is more on the hot seat, because of the Deshaun trade, and Kevin Stefanski was probably more safe. I think this year, if these guys hit but the team's still bad, it might be the opposite. So I think that'd be kind of an interesting thing to see how it plays out once we get to the season.
Let me throw this at you too, though. What if DeJuan Jones comes out and plays and he's your left tackle, and Martin Emerson rebounds and looks like a 1A corner like he did? Then those drafts don't look as bad either. The thing is as you're doing it in real time, everything is kind of relative. DeJuan Jones was hurt. Martin Emerson had a horrible year. If those guys can play like we thought they could, all of a sudden it's all right, you got a 4th rounder who's a starting left tackle, you got a 3rd rounder who's a starting cornerback. So that's kind of the danger in shifting it from year to year relative to drafts, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that, and there is still a chance somebody like DeJuan can become a foundation. And I think even if he doesn't make it at left tackle, Jack Conklin's in the last year of his deal. There's nothing saying you can't move him back to the right side next year and see what he can do. So he's still kind of got 2 years to see if he can be a player that hits for Andrew Berry as a 4th rounder. I still believe Martin Emerson is. I've been saying this for a while now. Martin Emerson had one really good year, one bad year. If he's somewhere in the middle, that's still a pretty good player. You know what I mean? That's still a guy that you feel comfortable being your number 2 corner, at least until Denzel Ward isn't considered a number 1 anymore. So, I think there's a good opportunity both those things happen, and then you can start to feel a little bit better about Andrew Berry's drafts as well. You do have to give these things some time to breathe. There's Alex Wright, who is going to get a lot of opportunities at defensive end. Isaiah McGuire as well, who I think showed some stuff last year after Zadarius Smith got traded. So, there's still some room for those guys to grow. But I think it all adds up to this being a really pivotal year for Berry in terms of – because right now – the one thing he's got against him is the biggest thing of all, which is he is going to forever be linked to the worst trade in NFL history, frankly. So to overcome that, this is a massive year. If he can get multiple guys from this year's class to hit, is some of these late round picks that maybe were late bloomers and just took some time to get acclimated, start to sort of round into form or show that they can be members of this team moving forward. Then all of a sudden, I think the conversation around Andrew Berry does change.
Yeah, and you know what? The other thing is he took Jedrick Wills 10th overall, and Tristan Wirfs was taking a couple spots behind him. Same position.
Yeah.
One is now not with a team, and one is a Pro Bowler.
Yeah. Well, and when you've only had, real quick, when you only had 2 first-round picks to this point until this year, like, yeah, it's pretty egregious when you're like, well, one of them's good, not great, and one of them was a complete bust. That's not great. So,
no.
yeah.
All right, before I let you go, best case scenario for the Browns in 2025. Again, I know you talked about this on the Locked On Browns podcast.
So I was trying to have some fun with the idea that, like, I know how these things go in the lead up to the season. We all have ideas right now of how the season's going to go, how good or bad the team is going to be. Vegas has their odds all set at like 4.5, 5.5 wins. But if this team, like, I think this defense is going to be really, really good again. I'm not going to say they're guaranteed to be top 5 like they were 2 years ago. But I think last year, if you were watching those games, Dave, like, that defense, as they got a bad rap, but it was a lot of short fields they were defending. It was a lot of turnovers from the offense that they had to sort of try to bail them out of. So it wasn't like they were given the best opportunities all the time. I still think they did a solid job overall of keeping the Browns in as many games as possible. But when your offense is going 3 and out most drives, it's kind of hard to limit scoring from other teams. So I think the defense has a chance to be really good. I think the pass rush in particular is maybe the best it's been, since Kevin Stfansky and Andrew Berry have been here. They have a really deep, I think, cast of guys there. And then on top of that, if you get competent quarterback play, or if Joe Flacco turns back the clock to 2023 and has like a long season of consistent play in this offense, or maybe you hit on one of the rookies and he kind of and they kind of emerge. Like, I could see a world where this team at least gets to December and they're at least in the hunt, right? Like, they're showing up on the graphic with like 6 or 7 wins, and it's like, hey, depending on how they play in December, maybe we're talking about a playoff team here. I know it's probably a little far-fetched. I know it's hard for people to sort of picture, but I know by the time the season rolls around, there will be Browns fans trying to talk themselves into that idea that this season can mean something and will mean something. I also think the presence of this new revamped run game that they're going to have is going to be so pivotal, because that's going to be the identity of the offense. And as was kind of said on one of those clips you played, like, having a solid run game can also work wonders if a rookie quarterback is starting, because it takes some pressure off of them. So I think this I'm not going to sit here and tell you today that this team is going to be a playoff team, but I do think, like, if the defense is as good as I think it's going to be, and the offense can figure some things out, and you get and if you get quarterback play that isn't putting you behind the 8 ball or costing you games, there's nothing saying like they can't put up a fight and at least be in that playoff conversation potentially by the time the season gets sort of towards the waning weeks and you're sort of fighting for your life there.
Yeah, that's kind of where I think they're going to be as well, without question. Spencer German, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Spencer.
Always a pleasure, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out on 92.3 The Fan, Locked On Browns podcast, as well as the Cleveland Browns on SI. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here at 4 o'clock on Monday on Sports for CLE.